Selling your dental practice is one of the biggest decisions you will make in your dental career. Buying a dental practice is the biggest, and I'm thrilled to be talking with a transitions expert today from DDS Match, an amazing key resource and sponsor of our group. So welcome to our show. I'd like you to introduce yourself to our audience and just tell us what you do in your daily day to help dentists realize their dreams and avoid screams.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to Nachos for having me on today. My name is Scott Belcheff, and I am a transition specialist here in Arizona. Actually live in Gilbert, Arizona, and we get great weather, and we love it out here.
Nice, a very popular place. I go to many courses out there in Arizona. You know, someone asked the dentist, what do they do all day? I say, I do fillings and crowns, try not to cry inside, referee fights. That's my day as a dentist. Tell us a little bit about what you do in your daily day. What kind of intake are you getting from dentists out there? What are they reaching out to you for? I like to help my audience understand things in a fundamental way. I like to mention that my dream was to play professional basketball. That dream failed, Scott. This is what I do instead. But give us the fundamentals of what you're doing in your daily day to help dentists.
Yeah, so our days can be pretty busy with, a lot of it is, asking questions and talking, building relationships with CPAs and lawyers and different professionals in the industry. And when we talk to dentists, a lot of the questions are going to be, what's the market like right now in Arizona? We talk to sellers and buyers on a regular basis, and sellers want to know, what's the DSO market doing? What's the private market doing? Sellers or buyers want to know, things like, should I, I'm getting out of school. Should I work for a DSO or a private buyers, hiring associates? Should I look at buying a practice now? When's the right time to buy a practice? And a lot of it's going to be on the market in Arizona and where it's going and what the industry is like here.
Yeah, then you guys have your ear to the proverbial transitions ground at all time. We've been doing some amazing podcasts with your other DDS Mass Transitions experts. I've enjoyed them. I've been learning. Tell us a little bit about, you've already hit on it. People are asking about what's going on in Arizona.
Right.
And while there are fundamental things to your process, which we want to go over, your trusted transitions process, just tell our audience why geography matters, why Arizona could be different than LA, could be different than Philadelphia, why if you're reaching out to buy or sell practice, working with somebody who knows that area can be so helpful.
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're coming to Arizona, you want to know that you want to live in Arizona, right? You want to have a sense of community. Do you have family here? Do you have friends here? Is there a reason you want to move here? Is it because you want to be here for the weather? But not only that, you want to understand the dental market out here. How many private practices are there in a certain area? Is that area saturated? Should I go rural? Should I be, in a more dense population? There's a lot of questions that are important when you're deciding on where you want to, either purchase your practice or start a practice. So those are questions we can help answer and make sure that you understand this is the right fit for you. Yeah. It's really important because you don't want to get to a certain place or live in a place and find out, maybe this wasn't right for us. Or the school's great for my kids, my families. Yeah. What is my wife going to do when we move, or my husband, right? These are all important questions that we can help answer and kind of give you guidance on what the community's like.
I love what you're sharing, and you're helping my audience. And one of my tenets at Dental Nachos is JBN, just be nice. And what that means, Scott, is dentists, they're good at being nice to patients, not so nice to each other. Because we go to dental school and it's pretty much the Hunger Games, okay? It's kind of the most toxic way to learn. It's they kind of compete against other dental students. So we don't always come out being super friendly to each other, and our Dental Nachos strives to make that better. But I also have a JBR, just be real mentality, and I will get a buyer to contact me, and maybe it's in 4 years ago, and they say, hey, Paul, I want to buy a dental practice. I'm ready to be a practice owner. I say, cool, I got a practice. It does $1.5 million a year. You can make 600 grand a year, and it's a private practice dentist, and she is ready to transition in the next 6 months. And they go, great, Paul, I want that practice. I go, it's in the middle of Pennsylvania. They go, I do not want that practice. So, it's key. And while we're going to get to the seller in a minute, but for buyers out there to connect with people like Scott so that they know you're looking, because I don't mess with my audience. But if I just, after this podcast, texted the audience of Philadelphia and said, hey, there is a $1 million practice with 40% seller discretionary earnings on 15th and Walnut, who's interested, I actually think I'd get 17 texts back by dinner time tonight. And it's just telling this audience, and I'm sure there's areas of Arizona where people feel that way too. It's telling this audience that connecting with your team is so key. And you've highlighted that. And one thing I've gone through each podcast is dentists have no idea who to put on their team, right? In basketball, you
Right.
know who goes on your team. Who should be on the team for a seller? They reach out to you, they have the conversation, and let's just pretend they have no other trusted advisors. Walk us through who they should be working with in addition to their DDS match professional.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. So first, of course, when they connect with us and we're going to have these conversations, they need to have a good CPA that understands their financials, right? So that we can make sure when we're going through P&Ls that, we're going to have questions for that CPA. Is everything populated right? Is it categorized right?
Yeah.
So they need to have a strong dental CPA that understands the financials and the background of the business. And it's always great to have a good lawyer as well. So as we create the documents, the APA and the transition agreement, if there's an employee agreement or anything like that, we want to make sure that um, those are all reviewed properly by a lawyer. That way they can make sure that our seller is protected. It's all about protecting them and their interests and their practice they've worked so hard to build over the last, 20 to 40 years.
Yeah, it's wild to me and also poignant, but it's understandable. Dental school doesn't really teach anything about, and my friend Dr. Mark Costas talks about your board of advisors of who you're supposed to. So dentists can actually work their entire career without having these trusted advisors that they need at the finish line, they need at the red zone. And one of the things I talk about for buyers, Scott, maybe it'll make you laugh, is I always say, for a buyer, the bank is the mom of the decision, because your mom, when you were a kid, you had a lot of dumb ideas, right? And if your mom said no, that was the end of it, right? So I tell the buyers, like, you got to connect with banks, because unless you have a big pile of Scrooge McDuck money in your house, you're going to need someone to give you this money. And sellers, you better make sure that the buyers know a bank, because maybe they love your office and love your CBCT, but what you love is getting paid for this. So if we go to the seller world for a second, you guys have a really cool process for valuing the practice. Tell us about that. Like, let's say I'm the dentist, I own a practice, it does $1.6 million. It's in your area. And I say, hey, Scott, what can I get for my practice? I want to work with you. My wife said I should start thinking about this process. Walk me through a little bit about the valuation.
Yeah, the valuation, we use a company called Blue and Company. So they are a full medical and dental CPA firm out of Indianapolis. Now, the nice thing is we use a third-party company, so it takes us out of it, right? So nobody questions where we got our numbers from. Blue does this for a living, and they're very good at what they do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start asking questions about the practice, start gathering their financials, P&Ls, balance sheets, and then dive into the dental reports, production by code, insurance codes, all that kind of stuff that's monotonous and really hard to get in the beginning. But once we grab that, we let Blue and Company put a full, it's really like a 100-page valuation together that details the practice from all the ins and outs. That's the first thing we do. Then we also work with digital intel that allows us to build a report based on opportunities and strengths of the practice, and also let a buyer know where the opportunities are, but also know maybe things that he's not doing, right, or she's not doing, right? Like, Mitch, sometimes we talk about, like, if you're not doing implants, you don't want to buy a practice that 30% of the production comes from implants.
I want to pause you on that or interject, because it's so key. Because I'm the only one crazy enough to be a dentist on this call, and maybe you'll go to dental school fantasy camp one day, but I'm going to guess no. And what I'll share is, as someone who now does many different things, from running Dental Nachos, Dentist Job Connect, that when you have to handcraft something for a patient, if you don't like making it, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It does not matter. If you do
Right.
not like doing that, what I call full contact arts and crafts on people that don't want to be there, that's dentistry, Scott. So it's what you're pointing out is, in Dental Intelligence, they're not just sponsored too. They deliver the data and the details to help both the buyer and the seller understand the fit. And
Correct.
tell us a little more about that clinical fit, because that's, I believe, if we just call it what it is, it's not very difficult to get financing approval. Would you agree? If the practice,
No, it's not. If you've got your financials in order and the practices has got good cash flow, it's not hard to get financing for the practice.
and I won't say but, let's just go with this practice I made up. If I am doing a significant amount of implants and clear aligner and endo, I'm saying, Scott, look at me, I'm a super GP and I can, do $2 million a year on my own. Manage my expectations about the clinical fit for that buyer, and why we may have to be patient in finding the super GP to take over.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, and that's really critical. When buyers come, they're looking for practices. They usually don't think about the dynamics or the makeup or the different codes the practice might be doing. That's why it's really important that we go through those codes and make sure they understand how that practice is performing, where they're profitable, and the type of clinician they're going to be. And those are great questions to start with the buyer. What kind of clinician are you? What did you learn coming out of school? And what do you like to do? What about dentistry that makes you passionate and you love? If we get into dentistry and you get into practice doing things like endo or extractions or wisdom teeth extractions, you may want to do those things. So it's important that we go through that so you understand exactly what you're getting into and make sure that you love and not have to, that you can actually grow the practice the way you want to grow it.
Yeah, and I'll even add, I've tried to help I've been really enjoying these podcasts. I want to teach you guys to talk dentist, right? When you say to your clients, hey, you know how you make customized treatment plans for your patient? No two patients are the same, but you have common themes in treatment planning. That's
Right.
what we do as transition specialists. We customize your transition plan. No two are the same, but they have common themes. And I'll add, maybe because you don't do full contact arts and crafts like I do, Scott, where you keep your crying on the inside and you're sweating on the outside. That's what dentists do. I would add, like, you must be able to not hate certain procedures, because if that seller is doing that, love is a strong word. I don't love everything I do, but when I sit down with a patient, I can't truly dislike what I'm about to do in their mouth. And I think that's not talked about enough in these plans when it's really important to talk about. I made a whole shirt here about biceps and EBITDA. So I know EBITDA is important. I'm sure, if the dentist had a boat, they would name it EBITDA, but how you get to that EBITDA, what the dentists do, is equally as important. So I want
It's
to
very
not
important.
shift gears, but continue on here. If someone's listening who's a seller thinking, my family's been saying, Dad, when are you going to hang it up? And, Dad, what are you going to do next? And, I'm 58 years old, but I feel good. Tell me about when I should connect with a Scott if I'm in your area. When's too soon? When's too late? Is it a big deal to get started? Is there a cost to get started? Break it down in the most fundamental terms. Someone hears this podcast and they go, oh man, I'm in Arizona too. When should they be reaching out to you?
Man, I think you should reach out to us and get to know us as soon as you can, anytime in your career, because there's a lot of times in your career you don't know when something's going to happen. And I've had that happen recently where all of a sudden, a dentist who was healthy at one point gets in a car accident, he's not healthy anymore, right? And those are important steps where we can actually come in and make sure we help you with that practice and make sure we're taking care of you and your family. And we do like to get involved. Also, we have a process called the practice optimizer experience, which, if you get involved, anywhere between, 5 to 7 years out, and that way we can make sure that you're planning and you've got a purpose and you know exactly when you want to retire and how you want to retire. Make sure it's on your terms and you have full control over that. I don't know how many times I've talked to a dentist where, I think I'm ready to sell. And he went from 4 days a week to 2.5 for the last 2 years. And that kills the value of a practice. And they don't quite understand that. We want to get to them before that happens so we can make sure we're maximizing everything and building the practice. When he's ready to sell, he can make as much off that as he can. So like I said, I think anytime we can start building that relationship, the better, because it's a trust, it's a relationship that we work really closely together on. And I think it's important that he understands, or they understand, all the process that can go involved, the people they need to work with. Like you said, like we talked about earlier, who should I have on my team? Financial advisors, lawyers, CPAs. We can get all that in place for them.
And you're sharing such awesome value. I have a team member who, she's awesome. And she's like, I always check and see how much my house is worth, right? It's like, I'm not moving, but I just like to know, right? And more dentists should be like that, but it shouldn't necessarily be about totally the valuation. It's what's happening in this market, who's available in this market.
Mhm.
So, whether people say it's a seller's market or a buyer's market in different times, it's still your story of one. This is the only time you're going to be doing this for most dentists. And maybe talk to us for a minute, because I think a lot of dentists ask about this. They say, okay, Scott, I got a price that I'm happy with, right? I got a price that I'm happy with, and I'm going to sell to a private practice buyer. I'll stay on for 6 months. But what about my team? How important it is to find someone that will take care of my team. How do you walk them through that part of it?
I think it's really important. So when you have a seller and you got a buyer looking at the team, it's really important that, well, one, confidentiality we talked about in the beginning, making sure when do you tell the team members that you're thinking about selling? And that's a huge, huge issue. Not issue, but it's a huge question based on, I feel like there's never a right time to tell the team, right? Do I tell the team the day I'm leaving? And bring somebody in, it's a complete shock, or you tell them before, and then it freaks out the team and the patients find out, and
Yeah.
there could be a mess there as well, right? So I think that's always a very touchy subject, and we have to go based on how the process goes. Let this, give advice to the seller and buyer that when would be the right time. What is it? Maybe it's after the APA sign, everybody's comfortable. Then you have a full sit down with the team, introduce the new doctor. I'm usually there, help them, tell them why this is a great fit for them and why the doctor chose to make the decision they may decide to make. And that way they can meet the team and hopefully build that relationship right away, because you want them to stay, especially if that team's been there 8 to 10 years, right? They've
And
got
what's
a
interesting is the team wants to stay, but I
Mhm.
found that like 114% of people don't like change, Scott. And if
I
it's
don't
not
like change.
introduced right, I'll call it a nacho freak out, right? And they do
Yep.
things, you know, what I always find is, and it's patients and team. And if I can just use a second, you can maybe you'll laugh at this. It's like patients leave a practice if they find out someone's selling it. If they do, they still have to go to a new dentist somewhere else. So why don't they try the new dentist? And maybe what can help buyers and sellers be more confident is most do try the new dentist. Most do preserve the goodwill. But what are some of the key aspects of what I guess sellers and buyers should be aware of in preserving this goodwill? Because, tell our audience what is the big, you sell practice for $1 million. What's the most expensive part? What's the big,
Goodwill. Yeah, absolutely. That retention rate. You want to keep every patient you can keep.
and
Right.
when practices don't create a plan early enough and they're
Hmm.
more reactive instead of proactive. I mean, I'll just share with someone. I see disasters happen, right? I see people saying, I've seen people whose families moved across the country and then said, Paul, my previous broker didn't sell my practice right, or I didn't sound the right person. Can you do it now? And just like I used this example before, we don't like when patients come to us 2 weeks left in the year, Scott, and say, I'd like to use my insurance now to do those 4 crowns that you mentioned. And I go, well, there was 50 other weeks in the year. So don't put your broker under duress, because that can cause a lot of stress on everyone and you wind up not getting the best price or the best transition plan. So if you were talking to a seller and you had this opportunity, what would you tell them are some things they should be doing today?
Oh, I think it's a great question. So like you talking about, like the change. So I think preparing, put the process together, making sure that you have your steps in place, right? You need to make sure that, okay, when are you going to communicate with your team? How are we going to communicate with the patients? A lot of patients sometimes will be asking the dentist, are you going to retire anytime soon? Because they know that it could be coming soon based on their age of their dentist. So I think it's important that you plan that out and you have a process
You know
like
what?
that.
I want to share. You've made a good point just now, and I want you to continue. But when a dentist says that, you know what I should say to people? Yes, I might retire soon. Why don't you do all your work now, right? So it could be a
Get
great
in there
marketing
now.
opportunity to make them scared. I always think but people say that all the time to dentists, and it's a very emotional relationship that the patient has with both the dentist and the team. So I want you to continue, but it just made me think of that when you said, "Are you going to retire soon?" I'm going to start saying, "Yeah, why don't you do all the work today?"
We're all together. That's right. Get it all in and get it done. And it's not just, it's just usually not the mom or dad. They've got their kids going there. Usually it's a family that sees that practice, right? So if you lose one person, you lose a whole family.
Yeah.
Go somewhere else. And like you said, there's more changing dental practices there is just changing the owner. If a patient still understands and knows the staff and they know where they're going and they know the front desk person, there's still some sense of home there, right?
Yeah.
But if you change dental practice, you're starting all over again. They got to learn everything about you again. So why change? Give that doctor a chance. And like I said, if you plan far enough ahead, you send letters, you send emails out, and let the patients know, then usually they're going to come back in and they're going to be happy. And I think it's important the doctors stay around, the sellers stay around for a little while.
And it's great.
Just
I want to, as
at
we
least be
have
in the practice for a day or two a week so they can actually say, hey, this is who I'm passing the
It's
practice
that
off to.
transfer. My friend Dr. Todd Fleischman talks about it. It's a transfer of trust. And
Yeah, exactly.
I have a fun lightning round as we wrap up. I want to remind everyone I'm talking the awesome Dr. Scott Belcheff. Not doctor. You're not a doctor in what you do, but you're a doctor of transition. We'll call you like I'm a doctor of nachos. So I'll give you an honorary.
Honorary nickname, right? I'll
Yeah,
take it.
honorary nickname. And you're in the Arizona area, and we've talked about a lot of things that you do. I'm going to do a bonus round to just give some context. So tell our audience, if you're looking to sell your practice and you do $1.5 million a year and you have strong profit, How long will you have to stay after the sale if you sell to a DSO most of the time?
DSO, you're looking at 5 years usually, but maybe 3 with some, but you're going to be there for at least 5.
And a private practice, if you just said that same practice to a private practice buyer.
Same if a private practice, you could walk out the day it sells, or you could stay a month or 2 or 6 months, depending on what you and the buyer, the private buyer, would like to do. You guys can actually negotiate that. It's what's best for the team and the staff.
And I think with, and you can share your experience, but I think that is the number one determinant of whether dentists want to sell to a DSO
It
or not.
is.
It's not the windfall of money that they may or may not get. It is not the 8x EBITDA. It is not the being part of the team. It's how much longer do they want to keep holding that handpiece in some capacity?
Some capacity. And it's also the stress level that you want to keep in your life.
Totally.
If you sell your practice to, so I've done this a couple times now. It actually worked out really well where we sold the practice to a private buyer and the seller becomes the associate. So they can still do dentistry a day or 2 a week. They still get to be involved and it still gives them some purpose and things that they'd love to do. Now, if you sell to DSO, you don't lose that stress. Now you just have to report everything to somebody and it's not yourself.
And
So
I love
now
it.
you still have numbers that you have to hit, benchmarks you have to hit. That
Yes.
stress doesn't decrease, it increases.
The one thing, I wanted to, so I have a 5-year-old, and the other day she said to me, Dad, video this because I'm really good at this dance. And I thought that's very cool. We should be proud of ourselves more, right? So I want you to be proud of yourself in a second with DDS Match. I'll start in that. In my transitions, we acquired a practice, merged one, and the seller stayed on and worked with us from 3 to 2 to 1 days for 5 years. And as you know, that means that we were good to work with and he was good to work with because we stayed for 5 years, and I'm proud of that. The DDS Match difference, or what you guys do, it is a nacho nuts world of dual rep brokers, which are dangerous, brokers who didn't give me their last name, brokers who tried to sell me a practice that wasn't even for sale. That happened to me once, Scott. It's very emotional. Some broker said, "Oh, Paul, you want to be in Philadelphia? I got a practice for you." This is like 8 years ago. I got a practice for you. And I'm like, this dentist isn't even selling, right? Like, it was just a total lie. So DDS Match is a responsible group that works together with a process. So tell us a little bit about this DDS Match difference and why that matters so much.
Oh boy, that's a good one. So when I started my career back in 2008 with Patterson Dental. So as I went through my career as a sales rep and then a branch manager, as I went through, I saw several people, that I really admired and trusted in the industry that went over to DDS Match. So I started asking them questions about it and getting to know why they chose DDS Match and why they went over there. And it was really eye-opening and amazing because all these people I trusted, they do it because they saw a need and they're passionate about what they do. And so not only do we each have our own, businesses and territories, but we also have a great network of DDS Match colleagues all across the country that have seen it, done it. And so we have a great amount of knowledge and expertise that we can, if we don't know, somebody out there has seen it. And we help each other, and it just ends up being a win-win for our patients, or for our sellers, buyers, and their patients,
Yeah.
So that's a big reason that I chose DDS Match.
I absolutely love that. I've enjoyed talking to all of you. Proud to have you as a key resource and sponsor. People would like to connect with Scott. You can text by to 215-543-6454 or text cell to 215-543-6454. We will continue to help dentists treatment plan the biggest decisions of their career, Scott, with success and not stress. Thanks so much for sharing with me.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time today. It was a blast.